today I'm talking to one of the people who is in my Accent Teachers Academy. Her name is Margarita, and she really wanted to talk about putting the student first. So today you're going to hear about language learning at school versus later in life, how that's different when we're children versus adults. There's some other thoughts around goals that we have in speaking English or whatever your second language happens to be, how those learning instruments that we use for language can be also different, and how your routine might affect that as well. So I'm Bianca, your personal American accent coach, and I'm here to help you master an American accent in English because your voice is your choice when it comes to how you sound. I try to release a podcast episode every 2 weeks, and so you should really subscribe to whatever podcast platform you use so that you don't miss the newest episode. And by the way, if you want to see the full video of the episode, it's available at Accent Coach Bianca on YouTube. Now, let's get on with the show. Welcome, Margarita. I see you several times a week, but it's nice because this is the first time we've been on the podcast together. So if you can just introduce yourself to everybody, that'd be fantastic.
Hi, everyone. My name is Margarita. I'm an English teacher from Russia, and I mostly teach adult students who need English for work and for other purposes in their lives. And Bianca suggested discussing the approach I use. And I'm happy to be here, and I have a lot to say.
Yes, I know you do. That's why I thought, oh yeah, we got to have this discussion together and record it because we have a lot of great discussions and things that come up. And so to sit down and say, oh, let's actually take the time to press record here makes it a special opportunity for me. So thank you so much for being here. Tell me, in general, I agree with you, but in your own kind of words, in your own perspective, why is it important for you? What makes you put the student first?
Well, I think it's more conductive to reaching their goals, actually, because I've seen a lot of cases when someone needed English for work, they needed to negotiate a contract. And they tried to improve their English for this. And they were given a basic textbook and they needed to learn something random. So something they didn't really need and they didn't see the point of learning that stuff. And it was very demotivating for them because maybe they would be able to get to the things they needed eventually. But it would take a lot of time and maybe not everyone would make it. In my case, it also happens as a learner, not of English, but some other languages. I'm given a task and I need to talk about kinds of trees. And I'm not interested in such things in Russian, actually. I'm a city girl. I am not really interested in kinds of animals you meet on a farm or kinds of trees in botany. So
Whereas I could talk about that all day long. I could talk about rocks and trees and lichens and mosses and bugs.
Yeah.
I could talk about those things all day long, but that's not an interest that you would normally have. So that makes it a ridiculous exercise for you to do in a second language, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And there was one case when I was using my approach to practice Mandarin Chinese. And what I ended up doing was retelling some Russian classics to native speakers. I was, okay, you just need to give me feedback and correct some mistakes. And I just told them about Anna Karenina, for example. And I looked up words, the high society, because she was a woman who fell in love with someone who wasn't her husband. And then she was exiled from the high society. And this girl who was helping me was, why would you need this expression? We don't have a high society anymore, especially in China. And I was like, okay, I need this expression to tell about the book. So for me, it was important for her. And logically, she was, maybe you would to talk about more basic words, pen, eraser, table. And I was, no, I want to talk about high society. And actually, it was quite useful for me when I was preparing to tell her about it, because of course I didn't have a vocabulary. I looked things up. And if you know the plot of the book, there is a train at the end. And this is how I learned the word train. And it stuck because I was, I know the story and I can connect something to this story and I will remember later. And this is how I try to connect new words and grammar with what students are interested in. Maybe to some things they have in their lives or some things they like to talk about, maybe some favorite books, series. And I actually had one student who didn't want to talk about random things from the grammar book, and he
Yeah.
hated those examples and he didn't understand anything. But when I explained the same thing, but about money
Mm.
and about his boss to
Mhm.
criticize his management's decisions,
Mhm.
it worked amazingly well.
He
So
lights
like,
up probably, right? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. He lights up and he gets it.
I know this, you know this, but a lot of people listening to this might actually be a revelation, even though to us it's a normal thing is to say, oh, go with what's meaningful to you, to the student. And you and I are teachers and learners of other languages. So when we have our learning hat on, we kind of drive the bus, right? And we say, I know this you teacher is not what you had in mind, and this is not what you think is traditional teaching, but this is what I know that I need. And I can see that when I put my teaching hat on. So we're in a unique position, I think, to do it and to say it out loud because a lot of people don't recognize that. So I want to reiterate thinking about what's
Mhm.
meaningful to you as the person who is learning can be so powerful because then you just said you light up, you really connect with the material. It's memorable, becomes much more memorable. And something you mentioned a moment ago about the stories and using that. One thing I just wanted to mention culturally, I love Russian folk tales. I love the characters in a lot of these Russian folk tales. The Leshy character, it's a grandma witch character,
Baba Yaga.
and there's another one that starts with a D, I think too, Dobrinaya, something like that. Another one that I'm
Uh,
familiar with.
there is a knight called Dobrynya Nikitich.
That's the
So
one I'm
like
thinking of. Yes.
Dobrynya, son of Nikita. Yeah, it's
Exactly, yes. To me, these cultural folk tales that we have, they're with us from when we're children. And when you mentioned the stories, I just thought of that and I wanted to mention that. I
mm-hmm.
love those things. But you like you said, some people are not into that at all. So
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what you are into as the learner and communicating that with your teacher can be really helpful because that is not what happens in school, right? When you're a child, you go to
Mm-hmm.
school, they don't say, "Oh, are you really into Legos? Yes, let's use Legos for math." Wouldn't it be great if they did that for us when we were kids,
Mm-hmm.
for example?
Absolutely, but it's not possible logistically
Mm,
because the school system we have now, it's an industrial thing
mhm,
because you have a lot of students. You have one textbook which was made to fit all those, like the purpose of
mm,
educating everyone at the same time, and it's not a good fit.
mm.
It's like buying clothes off the rack
Mm,
instead of tailoring them or
mhm,
having them
mhm,
tailored to
mm,
your needs. And actually, I can say that maybe it's not as new as we think because the way I talk to my students, trying to find out what they like, what they don't, and to have a conversation, it's very similar to what the ancient Greeks used to do. They had this model like Socrates, if I'm
mhm,
pronouncing
mhm,
his
mhm.
name correctly in English,
Socrates, we would
like
say, yeah, Socrates.
Socrates.
Mhm,
Socrates, he had that Socratic method
mhm,
of having dialogues with his students. It was this exact thing. Then there is a mentor, so a
mhm,
teacher
mhm,
and a student, and they have a conversation about
mm,
stuff
mm,
and they uncover some truths in the
mhm.
dialogue. And it's the same here. So I think it's a return of the same thing
I don't know
with the
about
new.
you. I'm having a conversation with a student, but I'm secretly leading them to something.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to tease out maybe a keyword or a phrase or a verb tense from them because I have something else in mind. You're right. I didn't really think about that, how we've kind of returned back to that way of doing things. And speaking of people that are more recent, too, tell me how you feel about Sir Ken Robinson.
Well, I totally agree with his stance on the school system, how it needs to be changed, because as I said before, the current school system is something industrial, then you have the material, so
Mm,
like the kids, and you
mhm,
need to mold them, you need to bend them into a certain shape to
mhm,
fit the needs of the society. An earlier era than this system was formed, you had certain roles and you would need to bend those people into a shape. And I think in the current society, we have more opportunities, we have more roles you could fulfill. And maybe you don't need to bend people that much. Maybe you can
mhm,
give them a little creative freedom and you
mm,
might want to interest them because
mm,
imagine going to school. So you have to stay there against your will, actually. Your
mhm,
parents, the society, everyone makes you come there. So you don't really wanna. And then you're
mhm.
stuck there. You're
Yeah.
locked in. And there is some enforcer making you do stuff. You're not very interested in it. If we're talking about the carrot and the stick, it's definitely the stick. And I
Yes.
think we can use the carrot actually. So
That's what I was
I'm
gonna
not,
ask you. I was
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
say, you made me think of the comparison between schools and prisons in this
yeah.
industrial age. Yeah. Also, you made me think of like, during pandemic, when the kids were at home with the parents suddenly just didn't know what to do, it seemed. I don't have children, but it seemed to me the parents were like, I don't know how to do all this work. And so schools kind of existed to get kids out of the parents' hair in a way. So you said there was this need there. There was this need to develop this kind of industrialized schooling. So here's a question for you. What do you think we need now if we don't need that industrialization?
Well, I think we need more flexible ways
Mm.
of teaching. So, like,
Mhm.
I mostly teach adults, so I
Yeah.
can't say that I'm an expert on teaching children. But I know that in Finland, they have more freedom for
Mhm.
kids and
Mhm.
they kind of ask them, what do you want to do today? So we have this class, you can go to the cooking class, or we can go to the chemistry class and there will be fun
Mhm.
experiments there.
Mhm.
And you can kind of choose what you want to do. So, like, if someone asks you, you have some agency in your life.
Mm.
You can decide. And I think it's a great thing to have,
Yeah.
especially with my students who come to me as adults.
Oh,
They
yes.
still expect this treatment. So, in
Mhm.
many cases, they're surprised that I ask them about what they wanted to.
Mm.
So, and
Mm.
after they recover from that surprise, they have good answers, actually. So,
So
it might
true.
turn out to be something that they never expected.
Mhm,
Because
mhm,
in many cases, people come saying, "Oh, I need to improve my English." So I always ask them, "Why do you need it?" Because
mhm,
there is a small percentage of people who actually don't really need it because it's just something socially acceptable to want. When you meet someone, they ask you, "Oh, what are you working on at the moment? What do you want
mhm.
to do? Do you have any plans?" And maybe there are New Year's resolutions,
Yes,
and you say,
yes.
"Oh, this year I'm
Yeah.
going to hit the gym. I'm
Mhm,
going to lose weight
mhm.
and I'm going to learn
Because that's
English
what you're
finally."
supposed to
So
say, right? Yes, yes.
yeah,
You
yeah, you're
yeah,
supposed to say it, but then I ask them, okay, so do you have a time? Do you really want it? Why?
Mhm,
And they're like,
mhm,
oh, I don't really wanna, or oh, I don't have a time,
mhm.
or I'm good. So because
Yeah.
sometimes they have reached a comfortable level already, so they can speak it a little. So maybe they can travel and order a cocktail,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
enough for them. They don't want to improve it
yeah.
actually, and I talk to them and I let them go because they don't need it.
And
So,
everybody's
but
happy.
yeah.
Yeah, nobody's ever asked them. So they're kind of
Mhm,
surprised by that. And if you're coming from this cultural or educational system, or let's say educational culture, in which you were never asked before, you probably don't even think that you don't need a thing because you've been told. And it reminds me of myself because I hate running. I hate running
mhm,
unless it's from a rabid dog or the police. You'll never see me running. I don't run to catch a bus, nothing. I hate running. Plus, I've had 2 surgeries on my knee. So running is a no. But I feel this social pressure constantly to I'm supposed to love to go jogging and I'm supposed to want to go running. Like, I hate running. But even still, and I know that about myself, but I still feel I'm supposed to feel like I want this thing and I need this thing and this is a good thing for
mhm,
me. So I can see how heavy that social pressure can be because I feel that
mhm,
in other ways too. People don't know. They can benefit so much from knowing what they want. We're not from a school culture that usually embraces that. I know I was not asked, do I want to go to a cooking class when I was a child? I got some flexibility as a teenager and then in university. But even as an adult, most of us will go to the teacher and just say, okay, teach me. Oh, you drive
mhm.
the bus. Whereas we'll do much better when we sit down and think about our needs and our desires and our motives too. And what
Yeah.
else did you want to say about that? Because I know you've had a lot of experience in shifting these ideas.
I can tell you that even if a person still says, "Oh, I want to learn English," there is a reason for it. Then you start asking them, especially about themselves. Sometimes they're really lost. Maybe it's a mom who always thinks about the kids, about work, about other stuff, and you ask them, "Oh, what do you like to do?" Or "Do you have a favorite color?" So, "What's your favorite food?" And they
Mm.
don't know because they lost themselves a
Yes.
little bit.
Yeah.
So,
Happens a lot. There's this analogy I used to really like. Somebody said, oh, if you always give a child a green crayon, and that's the only crayon you ever give them, and you ask them what their favorite color is, well, of course they're going to say it's green. We've done that. We've indoctrinated them to think that way. And then we're trying to undo all of that now, which takes a
mhm.
lot of work, a lot of work. So,
Yeah.
speaking of that, you said, why do you need English? Sometimes it's for exam prep as well, or traveling and things like this. So, you come across people who are able to then express those needs, right? And how does that
Hmm.
look for you?
Well, I just ask them about the details because they say, "Oh, I want to improve my English," and then we discuss what it looks for them, what they
Mhm.
want to do, and I need specific examples of what they maybe like to do in English because they
Mhm.
can say, "Oh, I want to be fluent." So what do you want to do fluently? Maybe there are specific topics you like to talk about, even if they don't know. If you don't articulate, there's always something. There's always something they like to do, something they like to talk about in their native language.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I try to adapt to that. So
Yeah.
I have a lot of students who work in tech.
Mhm.
And in many cases, those are shy guys who are not very good at small talk. Maybe they don't
Mhm.
know how to express some things. And then I ask them about what they're working on, about their setups, about their
Mhm.
computers, and they
I
light up
love to
and
talk
they're
about
ready
that.
to talk
Yeah.
about that. Yeah. And I don't have to be an expert on
Mm.
this, but I can ask them to clarify what's better, why this setup is superior, and it works miracles. Actually, you need to get when talking
Yeah.
first, then you
Yeah.
need to listen to them. And
Mhm.
then you can find maybe some grammar mistakes, maybe some words they don't know. And they ask you, "Oh, how do I say this in English?" And then we can get going starting from
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed that very few people will come to people these days, to teachers, to coaches, and realize, "Hey, it's my job to talk here. Let me think of some
Hmm.
topics to talk." And we have to kinda go fishing and tease it out of them. I literally ask people, "Hey, what are you most passionate about?" And something I realized just now when you were speaking was that I myself don't always volunteer information, not because I'm shy, but because I'm not used to people asking me all about the things.
Hmm.
So sometimes actually I'm a little bit put off when somebody asks too much about me and digs into my personal life. I'm a bit creepy, right? In a normal circumstance, you go out with somebody and somebody's really asking you about all the things. Whoa, that's a bit too much. That's a little bit too close of a relationship. So maybe we're not used to volunteering that kind of information, but once you kind of crack that nut open, all these things come out, and I feel like, I don't know if you've had this experience, I feel like it instantly bonds you to that client, to that
Hmm.
person, to that student, because
Yeah.
you suddenly know all about them and what they love, and you're able then to help them immediately. So I feel like it also creates an amazing kind of bond between the right people, right? If you don't feel
Hmm.
comfortable with this person, you'll know right away. But if they can get you talking and you respond with all those things you're passionate about, usually that indicates to me that it's a really good fit and you're going to really work well with this person. And also, you're thinking about too their style, right? You're noticing it, I think, at least when they're talking, like, oh, how do they talk about these things? What kind of a learner are they? If we kind of use that VARC model, which I love,
Hmm.
by the way, I'm super kinesthetic, for example. And a lot of my teachers never realized that. And it wasn't until I was in university that I took this VARC quiz to find out my
Hmm.
styles or my preferences or my abilities, that I realized, like, oh, that's why I did this way and that's why I did this way. So, what have you noticed about your students' learning styles? Because I bet that's new for some people as well.
Well, I can say that everyone's different. So that model shouldn't be taken literally because, okay, everyone can learn from all of those things by
Mm,
listening, by watching something done, or by writing some notes. Yeah, it can work to an extent. But
mhm,
for some people, it works better. For some people, it works worse, and they can have preferences. And
mhm,
since I work with adult learners, they went to school, usually to the university too. They learned something in their life. So they probably know what worked in the past and what didn't. Even
mhm,
if we're not talking about language learnings, maybe they learned some other subjects at a medical school, or if we're talking about my tech guys, they always need to learn something new because
mm,
in this area, new things come out all the time.
mhm.
And they know and they can tell you if they hate some way of learning. Because I have an example. So usually my students love watching videos. After doing the needs analysis and getting to know them, I kind of have an idea of what kinds of videos they might like. Sometimes it's good news or some videos about stars, like Oak does those 73 questions or what's in my bag. And usually it's very useful because they show stuff where there is a channel called The Great Big Story, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
And
I
those
love
are
that.
quite short. And they are amazing. And we can find out how people drink tea in different countries. And I used that video with tens of dozens of students. And then I came across a guy who wasn't very motivated in the first place because his wife was and is my student, and she kind of made him come to those classes. First of all, he wasn't very interested in himself, and then I sent him a video, and he threw a tantrum. A guy in his 40s, so a senior specialist in tech. And he hates watching videos. He told me that he couldn't learn from this because he couldn't force himself to watch because he likes to read. He likes to read the stuff he likes because I tried sending him articles and I thought it would work. So I tried to find some news from his area and he wasn't interested. But then I said, okay, you do it. So you can bring materials concerning your work. And also he reads some comic books and he sends me some materials that he came across with.
Hold on, I'm gonna pause here to review what happened so that people kind of understand, because we're teachers, but somebody listening might not be.
Okay.
So, wife, force? Yes, I don't know if that's too strong a word. Makes husband go to take these English classes. So first of all, you have this unwilling participant. So he's already in that mentality of being a little bit maybe contrary. Maybe there's some dynamics there that are already kind of being triggered, right? Comes in from a different system as well, clearly. You're trying to be helpful by providing materials because he's a bit reluctant. So this is what I think is amazing. He then tells you, he says, no, this is not my style. And he says, no, this is not material that gets me going. So I wanted to just pause there and tell people that those can be really uncomfortable conversations with teachers, with students to get them to drive the bus, right? And this got provoked in this person that didn't really want to be there in the first place. So the fact that came about and you were able to turn it around, I think is really amazing. And you said, oh, this isn't working for you? Great. Tell me what is. He already knew. Some people don't know, and that's a hard place to be. But he knew and he was able to say that. And after that, I'm sure things got better. So I just wanted to pause there and tell everybody that, yes, even though it's an uncomfortable thing to bring up and say, oh, your approach isn't working for me. Some students might think, or clients might think, oh, that's the way this teacher is. This teacher isn't right for me. But pause for a second, hold on, and have a conversation with the teacher because they might just be doing things simply because you're not. And they don't know what your preferences are. So I just wanted to pause there and say, wow, this sounds like the story has a happy ending. And that not all students are going to be as forward as that. And to please, if you are a person who's taking a class or getting coaching, be forward with those things whenever you notice them because your whole experience is going to be better. And we try to do that. We can always change and use a different modal, or we can do different modes together. So remember that if you like a coach or a teacher, but something's not working, have a conversation about that.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that I'm a difficult student myself because I'm currently learning Mandarin Chinese. And I had an unfortunate experience with a girl. So she's a Russian teacher who teaches Chinese. And we actually had those conversations. And turned out she thinks that given positive feedback is a waste of time. And I was like, what? It's like my core value. So you need to make your students feel comfortable. And for sure, since she usually does exam prep, she has time constraints. So she has no time for this. And so she's very stick oriented. And I have all the time in the world because I'm not doing it for an exam. I'm doing it for myself. So I had the talk with her. We got that it's not the right fit. And what I did was find some native speakers and I told them so that there is a list of things I like and I need recommendations of good series, books, memes, and they were happy to provide. So I made some friends who recommend things because there are movie premieres, there are interesting news, and they send some links my way. and I
Mhm,
made that
mhm.
comprehensible input for myself. I have points of contact with the language, and then I find out stuff and I try to talk about it. So,
Mhm,
for
mhm,
example, if there's a series which was recommended, I watch it. Maybe I don't understand everything. I use subtitles, but I know the characters. I can hear some familiar words, some expressions, and then I try to express my point of view. And this is what I encourage my students to do. So, okay,
mm,
for example, there's a love triangle in the series, and I have opinions why the main character should have married the other guy. And there's a list of things I gotta
mhm,
say.
mhm,
And actually, it even works if you watch something in your native language, but you have opinions.
mm,
It's the most important part. And I used this trick with some of my students who were very busy, who had no time for homework, who had no time to watch anything in English. I
mm,
was like, okay, so tell me, what was it about? Who was the main character? What were they like? And what happened?
mhm,
And then
mhm,
they get going, they
mm,
have opinions, and
mhm,
it works well. And I can get a lot of interesting things out of them.
mhm.
So a lot of emergent language, and
Yeah.
also if there is some grammar went through earlier,
Mhm,
I can encourage them to use it. For example,
mm,
conditionals are great for this.
mhm,
If you were the character, what would you do?
Yeah, we'll talk about routine in a minute, but how you can see
Mhm,
somebody's kind of skills, abilities, desires, and then couple that with their routine. I wanted to back
mhm,
up a
mhm.
second. This coach that you had for Mandarin, did you end up saying goodbye to this person? I didn't quite catch that. This
Well,
isn't good.
yeah, yeah, it wasn't the main reason why I said goodbye to her. It's
Mhm,
just that she didn't really have the time for building a routine, and I needed a stable input, and I needed
yeah.
to have classes every week, and she couldn't provide that, and
Okay.
she took a break for a month, and then she was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay, I'm
Mhm.
back," and I wasn't interested anymore. So
Yeah.
there is a mixed
Uh-huh.
situation, but
Uh-huh.
maybe one of the reasons was that because I wanted to try another approach to
Yeah.
that. So we could have worked with that. So there is a thing called asynchronous learning, so
Yes.
which I ended up doing with the people from China because we
Mm.
have quite a time difference.
Mhm.
So we exchange messages
Mhm.
and audios.
Mhm.
So I just end up talking about my day or maybe about my opinions on something watch the series or my book reviews or anything like
Mhm.
that, just some
Mhm.
random stuff in Mandarin.
Mm.
And I make a recording and I send that to that person. But in this case, you need to have some kind of a rapport to that
Mhm.
person. You have to
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
because I've tried it a few times in different capacities, learning different skills. But I think the crucial thing here is that you have to like them. When I tried to set it up with that person, I kept remembering her words about how positive feedback wasn't
Oh,
necessary.
no.
And I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like, oh no, oh no.
And I think we're in a unique position because we're both teachers. We know a lot about learning and teaching. We know a lot about both sides. And you can very clearly state, hey, this is what I need. This is what I want. This is how I work. Can you give me that? And if
Hmm.
that person's style doesn't match or they're unwilling to
Hmm.
kind of try something that you've said very specifically, this is what I want to do,
Hmm.
then yeah, it's also another difficult conversation. But I still think it should be a conversation, even when you're going to say
Hmm.
goodbye to somebody, is to make it a conversation. Sometimes people just drop off the planet and you don't know what
Hmm.
happened to them. But I think that comes from a
Yeah.
place of them being uncomfortable with these things. And to me, even if we're not going to work together, I'd like to know that you're going to be happy
Hmm.
somewhere else. I'd like to, if you need it, I'd like to recommend some other people that might fit with you better
Hmm.
because a lot of teachers know a lot of other teachers and you can steer them with
Hmm.
somebody that might work better for them. And I think that some people, that discomfort keeps them from talking to the person. I think having a good fit and liking the person makes a lot of those more challenging things, maybe in your case, asynchronous work, makes it easier, right? In that way.
Hmm.
So keep that in mind is you might have the right person, but the wrong method, right? You might have that good teachers, hopefully, will recommend somebody else in case it doesn't work
Hmm.
out. And all of this can be a conversation. The last thing I think you mentioned, since we're both teachers, we know about learning, but a lot of people don't know about learning. So maybe think
Hmm.
about this, people listening to this right now. If you are learning a second language or third or fourth or whatever language, and you probably don't or could know more. You could probably know a little bit more about learning and about how you could become a better learner and how you could drive the bus better with any teacher or coach that you might have. So consider this, consider getting coached a little bit on learning. And I think this is super important today, especially now with all the AI tools that we have and things that we're becoming much more independent learners, but nobody has taught us how to be independent learners, right? So I feel like it's our job, and you might disagree with me, but our job as teachers and coaches is to empower people in how all these things work. You're throwing out a lot of terms. So when you go in to a teacher, I'd be intimidated too, probably, if I had somebody like you walk in and tell me exactly what I need. But then I'd be like, phew, this girl knows what she needs. I'm going to give it right to her if that's in my ability. And that
Mhm.
would be a really good fit. But I know that's not true for other people. So
Yeah.
knowing all those things is not something we can expect from other people or students or clients. So I think that's going to get better through time, but I try to facilitate that quite a bit because they may
Mhm.
not even realize, hey, did you remember when you were in school? Wasn't that kind of like a prison? Didn't you hate every day
Yeah.
of your learning experience? And a lot of people just take it for granted, and now is the time to kind of get better at thinking about those things at least. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, and I want to say that sometimes I get students who were traumatized by their
Mm.
school experience. And I remember having an older student who was, I think, in her 60s or
Mm.
something, and
Mhm.
who told me tearfully that she wasn't any good at English because 50 years ago, her teacher at school yelled at her
Oh.
and humiliated her and told her she would never be able to speak English. And she kind of carried it with her for all this time. And I was horrified by this. And I was shocked by the teacher's behavior. And I
Mhm.
mean, we really need to think about what we do and how to talk to people in this vulnerable state. And
Mhm.
you shouldn't traumatize them like this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe that's why that comment about not praising people, not giving them positive
Yeah.
feedback hit me this because I always try to create those situations of small wins. So even if we're just starting out, I try to make them comfortable, make my students tell about themselves, about things they like, and then I always praise them if they
Mm.
manage to do so. And I'm like, okay, so like we've been speaking for 5 minutes in English without translating into Russian. Can you see this?
Yeah.
It's a win. That's amazing. And also, I try to give them some tasks related to what they like to do, what they need to do. And they really get excited about being able to speak about things they like or being
Mhm.
able to do small things. Maybe they can answer an email in
Mhm.
English for work. Where I remember there was a girl who got a phone call at work, and there was a person from Finland speaking English, and they just needed to leave a message, and she managed to write the message down and to give it to her boss later. And it was a huge win for sure because it was
Mm.
really working. It was helping her. Or
Nice.
now I have a student who is in Serbia, and
Mhm.
she went to watch the Barbie movie
Mhm.
yesterday, and
Mhm.
she posted on her stories that she was able to get some of that. So not only
Mm.
words, but whole
Mhm.
sentences now. And I was
Nice.
so happy for her because she could see things happening. Or the same girl managed to order something at a
Mhm.
restaurant
Mhm.
or have simple talks, and it was a huge success for her.
It's the little things, and also it's the feelings that we get from that,
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
pleasure, that pride from accomplishing a task that we wanted to do. We're just catching a little bit more. How you're describing it, it to me is now how we should be thinking about learning, because you and I,
Hmm.
we learned in the past and the methods in the past, and now we're trying to shape how we learn, how we teach, how other people think about their learning too, all at the same time, right? It's not just language, so much more. And a common question that I'm asked, which it's like nails on a chalkboard for me, is how long will this take? They often say, well, how long is this going to take? And that's such a complex question to me.
Hmm.
Bet you have feelings around this question too. How much time does it
Yeah.
take to learn?
A while, let's say.
Mhm.
So, like, it's not going to happen overnight. Sometimes people come and they say, "Oh, I have the A1 level,
Mm.
and I need to have B2 in 2 weeks. So, can we make it?" So,
Mhm.
and the answer is no. people who heard something about learning in their sleep, and they're like, okay, so can you like
Mhm.
make a recording for me, which I could sleep to? But no,
Mhm.
it doesn't work too. You need to really engage your brain
Mhm.
because unfortunately, no one can do it for you.
Mhm.
There are some calculations. They're not precise, but it takes around 200 hours of concentrated learning to go from one level to the next one.
Mm.
And some people come and say, oh, I've been learning English for 10 years now. Okay, but let's calculate the actual time
Yeah.
of learning. Like then
Uh-huh.
you were reading a book or
Mm.
then you were speaking English. And
Yeah.
in many cases, it comes down to minutes, not even hours of
Mhm.
learning.
Mhm.
So
And how
in
much
those
of that
10
was,
years, then
like, extensive in the background? How much of that was very intensive work?
yeah,
I think you and I
yeah.
last week we were talking about we mentioned the Matrix, right? We were saying until
Hmm.
such time as we can just plug in the language and then download it all into our brains, we still have to make a lot of concerted effort to do that. And those are the minutes that really count. There's a place for extensive stuff and intensive stuff too. I get clients all the time who say, "Oh, I've lived in Canada for 20 years." Or
Hmm.
I've lived in the US already 10 years and I'm still not speaking. I have the same thing. I've lived in Mexico now for about 6 years and I can say that my language level is not where I would like it to be. But again,
Hmm.
it's time, right? It comes down to time. I'm teaching all day. I'm thinking a lot in English, unless I'm going to the butcher shop or to buy some fruits and vegetables from this local place. Then I have not made enough space and time for this as I could.
Hmm.
So I know that. And I know that other people have lives too. So how do you talk about that with your clients?
Well, so first of all, I tell them what I told you about at least 200 hours per level. And also, there is a little table which I show them.
Mm.
And I ask them what their goals are, how quickly they want to learn. Because, okay, we can meet every work day, so 5 times a week,
Mhm.
or we can meet less frequently. So,
Mm.
and it really depends. How much time do you have? What can you do? Actually, I think it's very important to include language learning
Mm.
into your routine because in many cases if my students are active on social media, I ask them to tell me about what they like to watch in their free time, so
Mm.
what kinds of subscriptions they have on Instagram even.
Mhm.
And usually we can find the same thing, but in their target language.
Mhm.
Maybe someone likes watching traveling shows on YouTube,
Yeah.
and I'm certain there is the same thing, but in their target language. Or
Mhm.
makeup videos are very useful. I remember when I was learning French and I couldn't get a certain topic.
Mm.
I finally got it watching a makeup video because
Yeah.
there was this verb form and
Mm.
the girl was blending her makeup and she said, oh, it has to be very well blended. And I
Mm.
was like, oh, this is how you use it. This is the form I was struggling with. And now it made
Mhm.
sense because there was a situation I was
Mhm. Mhm.
invested in her makeup routine and it finally
Mhm.
clicked.
Yeah.
You can just make it less painful
Mhm.
to allocate the time to
Mm.
language learning if you just find useful things. And
Yeah.
the language you're learning becomes an instrument. It's not
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
final goal,
Mm.
it's an instrument to get to the thing you like.
The thing
So,
you
to the
really
desired
want.
result.
Yeah.
So, returning to that guy who was forced into language learning by
Mhm. Mhm.
his wife is also in tech and she's a Scrum master. And she reads Scrum guides because there are a lot of materials about how you should organize this or that. And they're all mostly in English.
Mm.
And she reads those articles, those guides for our lessons. And then she retells those things. And I love how she kind of translates, but not into Russian, but into what she has to do. She's
Mm.
thinking about what she has to do, and it kind of helps her at her work.
Yeah.
So she's creating a solution
Mhm.
for this thing she's invested in, and
Mhm.
she uses English for that. And
Yes.
I'm there to just help her with something she can't translate or to give
Mm.
her feedback. And
Mhm.
it's very enjoyable for her because she
Mhm.
can see the value. She can
Mhm.
see how
Mhm.
it works, how it
You
improves her
yeah.
life.
You've
And
gotten into her brain. You know how she
yeah,
thinks, you know
yeah.
how she works, you know what she likes. Yeah, and so you're just
Hmm.
there to kind of correct her and guide her
Hmm.
in kind of sitting on her shoulder. And
Mhm.
when you're not there, she might even be able to imagine you. Oh, what would Margarita say right now? What? And you're
Mhm.
kind of always there then because you've created a situation which is very realistic for her.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that's important. We said meaningful, memorable, realistic, right? All of these things. And I just wanted to say two things. Number one, you were talking about the husband who had this external kind of motivation, and that's
Mhm.
never going to work as well, I should say.
Mhm.
It's never going to work as well as an internal kind of motivation. So once he was able to find that, I'm sure the switch just kind of flipped and he did so much better once he realized that. So internal, intrinsic motivation is 100 times better than extrinsic motivation. And that I want to do a little plug here for our Discord channel because William, the moderator, he started the same way. For him, I think it was basketball. He was really into the NBA, right? American basketball. And so he ended up loving English, even though he took it in school and hated it. And then he kind of found this love of language through the sport that he already
Mhm.
loved. And so he's a learning enthusiast, he's an accent enthusiast. He's our moderator on Discord because we are on Discord quite often. And I wanted to tell other people too that this is a place where everybody can come and kind of talk about these things if you're interested in it. And also, I wanted to say that because Discord, if you don't know, the app already has tons of other servers. For example, if I were William and if I were really into basketball, then I would find a server in English about what I liked, right? You could easily find a server about makeup in English. So that's just 10xing your practice based on what you said, which is look at what you already like. Where can this fit in your schedule? If you say you don't have time, well, guess what? You're already doing stuff that you can just do in English and then talk about it and make it a lot more effective in that way. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you about my own experience when I was a teenager. I was really into Harry Potter and
Mm.
I got into the fandom.
Mm-hmm.
And I had opinions too. So I was like, okay, what do you mean? Draco Malfoy doesn't marry Hermione Granger. So they have to be together. So, and there
Mm-hmm.
were other people who were ready to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was a whole thing.
Yes.
And it actually brought a lot of material, kind of saw how the language was spoken.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
These are your
Yeah. And
hobbies, right? You're doing the same
yeah.
hobbies you would normally do, but in the other language. You just made me
Yeah.
realize that one of my hobbies is archery. And only because one of my friends here in Mexico, her husband is number 4 or something in all of Latin America. He's a really good archer. And she said, "Oh, do you want to come one day?" And I was like, "Oh, this is really cool." So I started getting into it, but they're bilingual. So we were always speaking in English. But you just made me realize, hello, I need to have them do our archery time in Spanish at least. So that's another way that I can work on my Spanish. So you just made me
Mhm.
realize that something I tell people, I do it in some areas, but not always. We can really do more code switching in our language. And it's not about the vocabulary of archery, which is not very transferable, but it's about the practice, right? It's about having that exposure and things like that. So if we're doing our hobbies in English, tell me how you feel about the H word, homework.
Well, I think it's optional because I know a lot of teachers who say, okay, so you have to do what I tell you to do. If you don't, let's call it quits. So they have a
Mm,
very particular view of what has to be done.
mm-hmm,
And I think it's not very nice to the
mm-hmm,
students because
mm-hmm,
I return to that table of how many hours it will take them. And I show it again. Okay, so are you sure you have no time to do something extra? So it's okay if you don't, but it will take longer.
mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
sometimes I had situations when initially the person agreed to having some homework and then they didn't do it. I told them, okay, let's do it together. So it's not a big deal because they were kind of embarrassed about it. But life happened. Maybe
Mm-hmm,
they really didn't have the time, or
mm-hmm,
maybe it
mm-hmm.
wasn't a priority at the time. So I just adapt to that, and I don't force
Yeah.
into. So
No skin
it's
off
not
my
the right.
nose. Life happens, as you said. Some people have this embarrassment, probably from school days, where you're chastised for not doing a thing outside, some kind of assignment or task that you were supposed to complete. But really, we're trying to work with you and where you're at right
Mhm.
now. And if you tell me you have a certain number of hours and you tell me that you have time for this, okay, I'll give you something to do. But if you don't end up doing it, it's just gonna set you back a little bit. And
Mhm.
that's fine too. But you said the whole idea of feeling shame or something like that and then
Mhm.
wanting to call it quits, That's probably not necessary, but we've
Yeah.
felt that too. Yeah. So I
Mm-hmm.
usually ask people, do you want a 5 minute activity? Do you want to do 1 hour on the weekend? One of the first things
Mm-hmm.
I say is everything we've talked about. What are you passionate about? What's your daily routine already? How is this going to fit into your life? What are your goals? What are your motivations? All of these are the primary things you want to know about somebody. And to me, the worst thing is not, oh, teacher, I didn't do my homework. Shame, shame, shame. No. To me, the worst thing is if I have somebody who has time on their hands and I see them next time and they say, I had time, but I had nothing to do. Oh, that would crush
Mm-hmm.
me. I want to give you more than you might have time for, but I don't expect you to do all of that. But I want to give you options. That's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
how I operate. And like you said, maybe that's just, oh, you're on social media? Oh, just flip the switch, go to the English one and just use that as a bit of extra time intensively if you can, extensively if you can't. Because like you
Mm-hmm.
said, there are habits. So what do you think about linking new habits to old habits and how that kind of transformation can occur?
Well, I think that there is always some time you could use for language learning. So, for example, you're commuting to work and you could use some flashcards on your phone. Maybe
Mm.
you could play the owl on Duolingo, or you could listen to a podcast or
Mm.
something like that. The thing is, in many cases, people don't know what to say in English. But
Mm.
I have some tricks I use. So if the students are active on social media, I follow them and I specifically ask them to maybe translate their post or
Mm.
to tell me about the situation they described later. So there were some stories which I'd like to discuss with you. So what
Mm.
happened? I saw you went shopping. What about the dress? Was it expensive? Or, oh, this happened. Tell me
Mhm.
more about it. And it's very effective. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
definitely.
could work because usually people have stuff happen to them. So
Mm.
even if they had no time for English, something else happened, and you can ask, "What happened?" Oh, okay, I haven't done my homework. I was busy. Oh, what did you do? What did you do instead? So I
Mhm.
have a student from my city who is a huge theater lover. She goes to different performances every weekend. And we decided that Monday is the day that she kind of gives me reviews. She tells me about what she watched, how it was, if the actors were good or not,
Mm.
if she recommends it or not. And it's amazing because I get recommendations actually for myself. It's very useful. And I ask genuine questions and
Mhm.
I write that stuff down. So maybe
The
I can go
reviews.
there later. So yeah, maybe some exhibitions, movie recommendations, maybe
Mm.
some funny videos on YouTube, whatever they were doing. So usually it's something useful to know or
Mhm.
useful to tell about for them.
Mhm.
Because in their lives, realistically, they're more likely to talk about those things than some others from the textbook, which are
Oh,
not so interesting to them.
absolutely. This brings it back around to what we originally were talking about, which is the fact that we have this book, but it's got a structure. It's for the masses, it's for this industrialized kind of learning. But what we want to do is we want to personalize people's learning to make it the most effective for them. Because here's a woman, for example, that you said it goes to the theater. Probably what she really wants to talk about with other people is the theater. And she wants to talk about how she feels about the reviews and she wants to make recommendations or tell people, ooh, that acting wasn't so great in that one. Maybe you should
Hmm.
go to this other show. So that gets right to the heart of what she needs. Of course, you're going to cover all of those things that are in the book, all the verb tenses,
Hmm.
all those things, the prepositions, phrasal verbs, all that stuff. But you're going to do it in a way that's more natural and more meaningful and memorable to that person, right? And to me, that's what
Hmm.
learning is about these days. It's not about going through the book and checking the answers in the back and things like that. It's about how can I do life in another language? Because we all have the same needs, right? We all want some entertainment. We all have to work. We all have to make friends and take care of our health and things like that. But how can I do all that stuff, but just through a different lens, in a different mentality, in a different way of expressing it, either to other people or in my own head? This is the heart of how we need to
Hmm.
look at things as the teacher or coach and also as the learner, because nowadays, I think that this is the style of where our learning is going is to be more autodidactic, right? To know more about yourself, your needs, your desires, and to communicate that more with an experienced guide, let's say, somebody like you or I, and have those conversations, which might be uncomfortable at times, but which is going to get us both to where we want to be.
Absolutely. And I know sometimes I consult friends, acquaintances, maybe people who are not ready to pay for lessons, but they ask me, how can I learn the language? And I can
Mm,
give you all the tools for this. I can recommend sites, what to watch, what to read, and then where to find native speakers to
mhm,
practice. It's a bit harder because okay, that native speaker has to be told what to do, what specifically you'd like to discuss.
mhm,
Maybe they're not always ready to
mhm,
do so, but
mm,
in general, this is what I do, and I just tell people
mhm.
about it. When I was learning Spanish more actively, I also did this. So I had this exchange set up with a woman from Mexico, actually.
Mhm.
And I just watched The Money Heist, if you know the
Yeah,
series
yeah, yeah,
about
yeah,
about the bank.
yeah.
And
But it
yeah,
was in
I
European Spanish, right? When I watched it, the only option available was European Spanish, not Latin American Spanish. And so
mhm,
when I was watching it in Mexico, to me, I thought, wow, there's so many vocabulary words here and their style of speaking. For me, it was an exercise of picking out all those little things because at the time, anyways,
mhm,
Netflix didn't have the option of a Latin
mhm,
American translation or, well, captioning,
mhm.
dubbing, I guess, in that. So that must have been interesting too, then for you.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So and I learned a lot of bad words from them too because they were
Clearly.
swearing all the
Yes.
time. So she asked me not to use that kind of language.
Yeah, or often the swearing is very different in the different dialects
Yeah,
in Spanish, so that's something you notice. Let's say you're really angry and you wanna use one of those words, but then you did it completely wrong because you didn't
yeah,
know,
it's
and then everything falls apart, right? You're trying to tell somebody off or defend yourself or something like that, and then it doesn't work. That's important too. These are all
yeah.
needs, and what you're describing as how you're approaching it, I think is really important. Not everybody has the same tools that we have because not everybody is a
Mhm,
teacher or a coach. But the main thing that I wanna come back to is putting the student first. Not all teachers and
mhm,
coaches do that. They don't put the student first. But also, if you're out there and you're listening to this, if you are the learner, you have to remember to put yourself first, right? For us, that's a bit
mhm,
easier because we've seen it from both sides. We know how to do that. We want to help you in knowing how to put yourself first, even if it's not with us, even if it's with some other teacher or coach, right? But knowing how to put yourself first and advocate for that and understanding that is going to make you a much more effective learner in any
mhm,
language. And it's a good life skill, I think, too, is making
mhm,
sure that you're advocating for yourself. But if we're not used to that, it's really hard to do that. So if you were to leave
mhm.
us with some, let's say, advice on how do I put myself first as a student? How do I start to do that? Should I think about my routine? Should I take a VARC quiz, for example? How would I start to put myself first?
Well, I would actually try to analyze my routine, like with my work, with all the other activities, and see how much time I first
Mhm,
of all, because I've had students who were overworked, burned out, and
mhm,
there was one girl who was completely overworked and who also decided to go on a very strict diet at the time, not eating, only drinking water for like 3 days and working very hard. And she couldn't form any new memories because her body was focused on surviving. And then she
mm,
had to cancel the lessons because she was in a hospital. And yeah, so this is an example of what not to do. So
mm,
please sleep, drink water, eat. Your
mm,
brain needs sustenance. And then get in there. So starting to work with a teacher. So you could tell them about your goals,
mhm,
what you want to do specifically, so, because there are different ways to get to that point. So,
mhm,
and then you
mhm,
could tell them about your previous experience, what you tried doing, what worked well, what didn't work so well. Maybe try having an open mind because if there was some exercise you tried with a different teacher or by yourself, maybe it's not going to be the same with this
mhm,
teacher. I
mhm.
think we discussed with you how shadowing was different in the student's mind and in the teacher's mind.
Yes.
And we're using the same word, but thinking about different things.
Mm,
So, yeah, please try it with a new teacher. But if it's still something that makes you uncomfortable, tell them. Definitely tell
mhm.
them if something doesn't work. Because in some situations, it's something small that can make or break that
Mhm,
experience. For
mhm,
example, I've had a conversation in a teacher's chat on Telegram,
mm,
and the teacher was complaining about making great games on word wall and making great interactive boards, but the student not appreciating that. And for
Uh,
the students, the moving elements on word wall were nauseating. And for that person, it was just uncomfortable. They preferred working in another way. But I can say that nowadays we have a plenty of options. We
mhm,
have lots and lots of ways to do stuff. So you don't have to work with something you're not uncomfortable with. You can ask
mhm,
your teacher if there is another way, because probably there is. I mean, there are still some limitations because I remember there was a student who was like, okay, I don't remember the verb forms very well. So maybe you can write more examples for me.
hmm,
And we had been through lots of examples. And I was like, okay, what about you writing the examples with the things we learned? So,
mhm,
and
mhm.
she was surprised and she was like, okay, no, it's like going to the gym
Yeah.
and telling your trainer to do some push-ups. Oh, my arms are a bit thin. Maybe
Uh-huh.
you could do some push-ups.
Yeah.
Like,
That's an awesome analogy. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So at the end of the day, it's still your responsibility to
Mhm,
do
mhm,
stuff. But
mhm,
if you're not comfortable with the way those exercises are organized, you can tell your teacher, and
mhm.
probably they have a solution.
Yes. And I think maybe that's a holdover that we need to start changing because we're using the word teacher and that evokes a classroom, that evokes, I'll
Okay,
tell you what to do. That's why I think I use the word coach more often.
coach.
But I like the word trainer. Like maybe we should just say language trainer or accent trainer
No.
because then it's like, oh, yeah, when you go to the gym, you don't expect them to do the work. You go to them because they're an expert. They can see what
Mm-hmm.
you need and they hopefully personalize that to you. Maybe it's the idea that we're kind of stuck in the past and
Mm-hmm.
even sometimes the words that we use for these things. So, yeah, I agree with you. You just mentioned Telegram. So, I wanted to end by talking about our community and other communities because
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about hobbies and there's communities for hobbies and maybe that community is just a channel on YouTube and the comment section. Or maybe
Mm-hmm.
there's a more involved community. Maybe you've got a Telegram community. I know those are very big in Russia and they're growing in other places too for community. But I wanted to mention our community on Discord because this is where people like us kind of come to nerd out and talk to other people like us. And you might be from the teaching side, you might be from the learning side, about accent, about language. And that's why I created this Discord specifically because it's people who are like us. And so I want to actually mention that and plug it is to say that if you join our Discord, you also have free office hours. So we meet once a week, if for nothing else, just to chat, like you said, talk about our hobbies and something always comes up. We're talking about basketball or whatever, and then we end up talking about, oh, but he said this, and do you use this these days? And I'll say, no, my grandmother used to say that, but nobody says that anymore. And we'll just get these things that pop up naturally, and that's I think how it should be. So I wanted to say, join a community for your hobby for sure, but also one that also incorporates language. And if you're really into it, then join our Discord. It's called Master an American Accent, and you'll get a free office hour every week where you can come and meet Margarita, you can come and meet me, you can come and meet William, the moderator, who we were just talking about too. We're all really into this stuff. And I wanted to add at the very end, I wanted to ask you if there's anything that people can do to connect with you specifically, because obviously you're an amazing teacher and people can find you and talk to you more about this. Where can they find you?
Okay, so I have a small Instagram page. So you can message me on Instagram. I think we will add the link here.
Yeah, it'll be in the show
So,
notes for sure in the description.
and I've been thinking about creating a Telegram channel. So maybe that's the time for it.
Uh-huh.
Like
Maybe
after
this is in the
making this
future.
video.
This will be
Yeah, hit me up
accountability.
on
Mhm.
Telegram. So,
Perfect.
yeah.
Yes. Good thought.
Feel free to contact me. I'm happy to talk about language learning anytime. So,
We love talking about this stuff. Feel free to message Margarita on our Instagram. The link will be in the show notes and interact with her in her stories and things like that. Help to push this kind of thinking out there. And also, if you want to meet us in person, then join our Discord and you'll get to see us at least once a week. So, yeah. Any final thoughts that you wanted to add?
so my main thought is we shouldn't be afraid of language learning. It doesn't have to be painful. It can be fun. So like it can be
Mm-hmm.
amazing and it can help you meet amazing people
Mm-hmm.
like Bianca here.
Mm-hmm.
So she's great. And yeah, making new friends, using the language as a tool to get to your goals. Maybe you're a fan of cooking and you could get
Mm-hmm.
some new recipes from there. Maybe you can
Mm-hmm.
get new ideas because I remember getting tons of new hobbies or tons of great book recommendations which don't exist in my language, which haven't been translated yet. So lots of new music, movies I wouldn't have watched without learning a new language. And it's a whole new world every time. And also memes. Like every new language unlocks a whole load of memes, which I love. And it's another way to connect with other people too. So you can have fun with new friends.
Yeah.
And I actually adore this thing. I love it so much.
Oh, that's such a good point. Yeah. The very last thing we can say is it's about the people, right? This communication, this language thing. It's about how we think about things. It's about connecting with other people and how we can do that. You're so right, because if somebody's missing from our Discord for like a week, they're on vacation or whatever, I'm like, oh, where were you? And everybody notices, where's that person? Where have they been? It's the community that we create, but it's the connections with people in the end. You're so right about that. We're of the same mind for sure. That's probably why we're together. We found each other. So you can find Margarita on Instagram, probably where you can find me if you're already listening to this podcast. And yeah, join our Discord though, because it's super fun. It's all people who want to talk about the same things. They want to work on their English and their accent at the same time. So let's end with that. And I want to say thank you so much, Margarita, for coming today to record this special session.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yes. And I will say goodbye to our listeners. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you soon.
See you. Bye.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
If you found this episode helpful in any way, please subscribe and leave a review. It's actually really helpful to me. Now, before I go, I have 2 tasks for you to do. First, I want you to register and come to my free monthly masterclass. They're on the last Thursday of the month. In just 1 hour, you're going to master a specific American accent skill. For example, the TH sound or rhythm. The Zoom registration link actually changes each month. So the second and maybe more important thing I want to ask you to do is to sign up for my mailing list, because you're going to get the registration link each month, and you're going to get bonus materials before and after the masterclass that I only send to my email list subscribers. The email opt-in link is down in the show notes. Be sure to sign up for my mailing list and come to the monthly masterclass for free. I'm Bianca, your personal American accent coach, and I want you to know that your voice is your choice. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the show. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.